So in this video we're going to have a look at system security and specifically how we identify and prevent the threats we've already looked at in the previous video where we identified the different ways that networks and computer systems could be attacked. So the first thing we're going to look at is network forensic and intrusion detection. So essentially what we're thinking about is how companies figure out the cause of attacks on a network. So if something's happening on a network, how do they detect it? If something's happened, how do we actually figure out if something actually has happened, and what the cause of that was? Now, one way of managing this is if an attack's happening over the network, you can monitor the different data packets being sent. So if you've got an internet connection coming into the network, you can inspect where those packets are coming from, if they're coming from a trustworthy location, if they're a packet that we were expecting to come back onto the network, and we can use that to figure out if the company is currently being attacked or has been attacked. Now, if something has been happening on the computers, it could be that system files on the computers are being targeted. So the important files that help run the operating system, that the operating system needs to manage the hardware on the computer. So if they are starting to get attacked or modified, the computers can figure this out and give us some sort of an alert. Now, within a company, it could be that a lot of the things that are happening on the network are logged. So on the computers at school, as you type things in onto the computers, if you plug USB drives into the USB ports, all of that is monitored by the network administrator and the software that they've got. So if a virus did come onto the system, we could use the logs to figure out, did it come because someone went on a particular website? Did it come because someone plugged in a USB drive that had a virus or some sort of malware on it? So these are some of the ways that we can figure out if an attack is happening or if an attack has happened and how it actually came to be. A way of preventing a fair few different of the threats we've already discussed is something called penetration testing or pen testing. Now, this is where a company pays for a cybersecurity specialist to attack their own network and their computers. Now, obviously that specialist stops short of causing any actual damage, and more often than not they'll agree a particular time of day where it will reduce the disruption on the network and agree how far into the network they can go. Now, once they've sort of attempted to get onto the network and found loopholes in the system, found weaknesses in the computers, they'll compile a report of the different weaknesses and issues that they identified, and the company can then make adjustments to their computers and their networks to make them more robust. So if an attacker tried these in real life, hopefully because of this measure being in place, they'll fail at attempting to get onto the network. Another preventative measure is having a firewall. Now, a firewall, as you may already know, could be a software package installed on the computers on the network, or it could be a hardware device that sits itself in between the local network and the computers on it and the internet where many of the threats may come from. Now, the way a firewall works is that they monitor ingoing and outgoing connections. Now, if any of those connections doesn't meet some of the rules set on that firewall, then it will deny access either ingoing or outgoing. So it could be that a virus is on a computer and trying to phone home and send some data to a server on the internet. The firewall could pick up on this and say, actually, no, we're not going to allow that connection to happen. It could also be that someone trying to remotely connect to a computer over the internet could have their connection blocked as well. Now, these connections might not just be based on IP addresses, it could also be based on ports. So different applications use different ports, and you might leave the more common ones open, but some of the more obscure or less well-known ports might be blocked by default. And obviously, if this causes for trouble on the network in terms of particular pieces of software requiring them, then the network administrator will have to sort that out and alter the rules on the firewall. Some firewalls can automatically create their own rules based on the conditions of the network. So say for instance, if we're thinking about brute force attacks and someone constantly attempting to log into a login form, the firewall might pick up on this and then start blocking IP addresses. As we've mentioned in the previous video, network policy is another preventative method, and the aim is again to prevent weaknesses caused by users. So everyone must accept the acceptable use policy. If you don't accept it, then the administrator won't let you on the network. And the whole idea is that you should be aware of the things that you should be allowed to do and shouldn't be allowed to do on those computers or on that network. And it'll cover things such as downloading and installing software, what websites you're allowed to and not allowed to access, turning off firewalls and antivirus on the computers, and setting up how strong your password should be. More often than not, even though you're agreeing to it, they'll be enforced by measures on the computers and on the network to prevent the rules from being broken. And the network administrator can monitor who is attempting to break those rules. So if you're trying to access a website that you're not allowed to access as set up by the acceptable use policy, the network administrator can see the requests to that website being made and being blocked, and they might have a discussion with that employee about why they're trying to access that website. Another thing the network administrator might set up is user access levels. So if you are to log into a computer with an account, you can limit what an account can and can't do. So if you think about the school, there is different types of user accounts. So you might have student accounts, you might have teacher accounts, and you might have IT managers accounts. So if you look at the table below, students are able to access their own files and they're able to read shared resources on a network drive. Teachers, people in the teachers group, have more access to more things. They might be able to access student files. They might be able to edit and delete things on the shared drives. And again, the network manager might have even more access. Now, even though people might have more access, they might lose particular rights based on the sorts of data they're allowed to access. So, say for instance, an IT manager shouldn't be able to read personal information on the students, while the teachers will need that level of access to be able to do their jobs. Now, the whole point of this is that an insider in a company can then have more access than they're meant to and start damaging the computers and the network. Equally, if someone got hold of a student account at a school, the amount of damage they could do with that login is very minimal. So you're limiting the amount of damage that can be done if an account becomes compromised. Obviously, an IT manager's account might be secured with additional features to prevent unauthorized access, because they've got significantly more control over the computers. Again, as we've already mentioned, passwords are a particularly important security feature because it's the access to people's accounts that they protect. Now, obviously, when considering a password, thinking back to that bike lock analogy, the more options you've got for each character, the more characters you've got in your password, significantly improves the strength of that password. So adding uppercase characters, numbers, punctuation, just simply having more characters in your password increases how long in random attempts it would take to guess a particular password. Now, as we've said before, a password still has to be memorable in order to be effective. Now, looking at this table again, you'll have seen it if you watched the last video. It shows how strong a password would have to be broken or randomly guessed in so many years or seconds or minutes. Now, one thing really important to remember is that even if you've got a particularly long password that uses lowercase, uppercase, letters, symbols, numbers, and so on, if your password is in the top 1,000 most commonly used passwords, it'll be basically cracked instantly. So you can view these lists online from where hackers have downloaded and dumped data off databases and essentially put these accounts on the internet. If your password is in that list, then regardless of how long it is, how complex it is going to get broken straight away. Even having things such as personal information that someone could simply Google about you to find that information, it makes your password weaker beyond random guessing. So if someone really wanted to be in your account, they'd be looking at your Facebook, they'd be looking at your Twitter, your Instagram, looking for bits of information about you that you might have put into your password. So if you've got anything like date of birth, maiden names of parents and things like that, these are all bits of information that a lot of people put in passwords and can be used against you in trying to access your online accounts. The final preventative measure is encryption. So encryption is a method of scrambling data, making it unreadable to those who don't have the correct key. And in this case, the key is very similar to a password. So if you've got some data you want to encrypt, you use your key and you run it through a very powerful and very complex algorithm called a cipher. And this process is relatively quick. So if you want to encrypt a message, use your key, use your cipher, you get your what we call a ciphertext at the other end, ready to send to someone else. Now, when that person receives the ciphertext, they use a different key to decrypt the data. So the key that you use to encrypt it and the key used to decrypt the data is not necessarily the same key. Now, even though it's relatively quick to generate the ciphertext and decrypt it if you've got the key, if you don't have the correct key, it would take an incredibly long time to try and decipher and decode the data that's being sent. Now, using a modern cipher, it could take potentially hundreds of millions of years to try and decode and decrypt that data, making it completely useless to a hacker who doesn't have millions of years to try and reverse engineer what you have sent.